This is the ultimate transitions guide where I explain the meanings of all the most common transitions that are on the June 2025 SAT. And I'll solve 25 examples to make sure that you get every single one of these questions correct. I'm Mohammed and I help students boost their SAT English score through my programs. Now let's dive in. But before we dive in, you can download all of these transitions with their meanings for completely free. Most of the planets that have been discovered outside our solar system orbit G-type stars like our Sun. In 2014, the researchers identified a planet orbiting Kelt 9, a B-type star more than twice as massive and nearly twice as hot as the Sun, called Kelt 9b. It is one of the hottest planets ever discovered. So, most planets orbit G-type stars, but in 2014, researchers found a planet that orbits a B-type star. So you need to pick a transition that is contrasting, which means at the beginning and at the end, there are two opposing ideas, or ideas that are opposite of each other. So let's look at the definition of these words. Choice A says likewise. Likewise means similarly, so it means a new but similar idea basically. However, it means in contrast, so when something is opposite to what was previously said. So when two things are opposite basically. Therefore, it means as a result, and for example, it's to give an example, pretty basic, yeah. So in here we said that most planets orbit G-type stars, but in 2014, researchers found a planet orbiting a B-type star. So this is contrasting, and we can see in our multiple choices, we have however, which means in contrast. So choice B is the correct answer. Let's look at this other one. The Babylonian king Hammurabi achieved much during his 40-year reign. He conquered all of Mesopotamia and built Babylon into one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world. Today, he is mainly remembered for a code of laws inscribed on a 7-foot-tall block of stone, the Code of Hammurabi. So basically, a Babylonian king did many things, but today he's just remembered for one thing. So again, this is contrasting. He did many things, but he's remembered only for one thing. So let's look at the definitions of the new keywords we have here. For instance is a new keyword that we didn't have in the previous question, so I'll explain that. For instance is the same as for example, and we know for example means to give an example. In here it says a Babylonian king did many things. Today he's just remembered for one thing. So this is contrasting basically. And we can see, therefore, it means as a result. Likewise, it's for similar ideas. However, it's contrasting. And for instance, is to give an example. So obviously, it's choice C. The Inca of South America used intricately knotted string devices called quipois to record countable information, like population data and payments. They may have used quipois to record more complex information, like stories and myths, according to researchers. So basically, the Inca of South America used devices called quipois to record countable information, and they might have used this device to record more complex information. So the keyword here is might. Now let's look at the choices. As a result, it means that this was a result of something. Choice B, it says in other words. In other words means to conclude or to summarize, but this is not concluding or summarizing anything. Choice C, it says in addition. Yeah, basically this is giving additional information. So in here it says the Inca of South America used devices called quipois to record countable information. And in addition, they might have used these devices to record more complex information. So yeah, in addition could make sense. For example, no, that wouldn't make sense here. In the 1880s, inventor Louis Latimer improved upon Thomas Edison's design for the electric light bulb. Latimer made the light bulb more durable by placing cardboard around its carbon filament. With this innovation, Latimer became the first black inventor to contribute to the electrification of the world. So this basically explains what was previously stated, but in more detail. So it explained it in more detail. Now let's look at the meanings of the multiple choices. First it says soon. Soon means a quick period of time after. And no, this is wrong. Choice B, regardless. Regardless basically means nonetheless, nevertheless, despite, which is basically most of the time used for contrasting transitions, like however. So the meaning of regardless, nonetheless, nevertheless, or despite of is even after something was stated, something else is true or false. So it's contrasting. Choice C, it says, however, we already know that. Choice D, it says specifically. Specifically is used when you go into specific details. For example, I ate dinner. Specifically, I ate a medium rare steak with mushroom sauce. And then here we can see that the same thing is applied. It says that the inventor Louis Latimer improved upon this other person's design for the electric light bulb. And then it explains how he did so it gives more detail. So choice D is correct. Again, you can download the list of all the transitions for free in the link below. Award-winning travel writer Linda Watanabe McFerrin considers the background research she conducts on destinations featured in her travel books to be its own reward. McFerrin admits to finding the research phase of her work just as fascinating and engaging as exploring a location in person. So the sentence after the blank emphasizes on the previous sentence, and it even confirms it more. Alright, let's look at the multiple choices. A, by contrast. By contrast is the same thing as in contrast, which means something opposite. Choice B, likewise. We've already mentioned that, which means similarly. C, besides. Besides means apart from. So this is used to show additional information. Choice D, it says in fact. In fact is used when you confirm something even more. For example, the fight looks intense. In fact, the fighters themselves, that was their most intense fight, so it confirmed it even more. And we can see that the same thing is applied here. The sentence after the blank emphasizes on the previous sentence, and it confirms it even more. So this means that choice D is correct. You're probably watching this for the June SAT and you're stressed because you're not prepared enough. Join our June SAT English workshop where I'll host a webinar the day before the exam where I share my best strategies, do lots of practice, and you can DM me or ask the others in the community questions. And if you're not sure if this is the right purchase for you, book a call with us. If you have more than a month left till the SAT, you can apply to work with us in the form below to get a guaranteed 150 plus points boost in 30 days. In 1873, Spanish scientist Santiago Ramon Cajal observed that brain fibers have distinct boundaries with clear endpoints, a finding that went against earlier assumptions about the brain. Scientists had assumed that the brain was a continuous web of fused fibers, not a vast network of distinct individual cells. So the line after the blank mentions what they had previously assumed. Alright, let's look at the multiple choices. A says however. However is contrasting, as we've previously said. Choice B says previously. Previously means beforehand, something that happened before. So this could be correct. As a result is used when you have a result, and likewise when a similar idea is presented. So the correct answer is B, previously. For years, biologists have experimented with using grime-eating bacteria rather than harsh chemicals to clean artworks, and results have been impressive overall. These bacterial strains, which can metabolize centuries worth of oil, glue, dirt, and other surface impurities without creating harmful byproducts, have proven more effective than traditional chemical cleaning methods. Alright, let's look at the multiple choices. However, it means that's contrasting, but there's no contrast. The line after the blank is supporting the line before the blank. Choice B, it says, in many cases. In many cases means many times. So it says many times these bacterial strains, which can metabolize centuries worth of oil, glue, dirt, and other surface impurities without creating harmful byproducts, have proven more effective than traditional chemical cleaning methods. Yeah, this makes sense and it could be used. But let's check the other choices. C, as a result. This text is not a result of anything. Choice D says additionally. Additionally doesn't make sense as well. Alexander Lawrence Posey varied his focus and tone depending on the genre in which he was writing. In his poetry, he used heartfelt language to evoke the beauty and peacefulness of his natural surroundings. In his journalism, he employed humor and satire to comment on political issues affecting his Muskogee Creek community. Alright, so in here it shows that two things are going against each other. So in here it says it evokes beauty and peacefulness, and in the other one it says it employs humor and satire. Let's look at the multiple choices. A, that is. That is, it's used for saying something again in different words. Basically, in other words. or to summarize basically. B, granted. Granted means to admit something. And in here, they're not admitting anything. So this is also wrong. C, similarly. Similarly is used to show a similar but new idea. And no, this is not a similar but new idea. But D, it says by contrast. By contrast means that the two things are opposite of each other, and we can see that the line after the blank is opposite of the line before the blank. Okot Bipatek's poem Song of Lawino explores post-colonial Ugandan life through the eyes of a woman living in a rural village, with its vibrant imagery, bitingly satiric tone, and dexterous use of traditional Acholi song and phraseology. The poem inspired a generation of East African writers. Those who adopted its style are often referred to as Okot school poets. Alright, so let's look at the multiple choices. A is nevertheless. Nevertheless means even what was after stated. So even after what was stated, something might be correct or might be false. So this is basically a contrasting transition. And in here, there is no contrast. Choice B says fittingly. Fittingly means suitably, when something suits or fits the case. And in here, it says that anyone who adopted her style are often referred to as Okot school poets. And yeah, this makes sense because anyone who used her style was named after her, which is very suitable, or it is very fitting. Choice C. By comparison. By comparison is when you compare two things, and in here you're not comparing anything to each other. Choice D, instead. Instead means alternatively, or basically when you have another choice. Because an acrical molecule is symmetrical, flipping it yields a structurally identical molecule. A flipped chiral molecule can be compared to a glove that has been turned inside out. It produces a structurally inverted molecule rather than an identical one. So in here, the line after the blank explains something opposite to another thing mentioned in the line before the blank. So now let's look at the multiple choices. A, it says in other words. In other words means to summarize, but this is wrong because we want something that's opposite to each other, so a contrasting word. Choice B, by contrast. Yeah, this makes sense because two things are going opposite of each other. Let's check the other choices. C, for example. No, there's no example to be given. D, similarly. No, these two things are opposite. So this is wrong and B is correct. Johan Ballari's story collection, Interpreter of Maladies, features multiple stories about romantic relationships. In this blessed house, newlyweds argue over whether to replace items left by the previous owners of their new home. In a temporary matter, a husband and wife attempt to rekindle their relationship during a 4-night blackout. So an example is given before, and another example similar to that is given after the blank. So there's a sequence of examples being given. So looking at the multiple choices, granted, as we said, means to admit something, but there is nothing to admit over here. For example, look, you might choose for example, I wouldn't blame you, but since there is a sequence of examples, you cannot use for example over and over again. Choice C, it says likewise. Yeah, likewise makes sense because a new idea is given that is similar to the previous ideas. So in the previous line, it gave an example, and in the line after, there's also another example given. So the same idea, but it's a little different. Choice D, it says hence. Hence means thus, or as a result, or therefore. Yeah, so the correct answer is C. Before California's 1911 election to approve a proposition granting women the right to vote, activists across the state sold tea to promote the cause of suffrage. In San Francisco, the Women's Suffrage Party sold equality tea at local fairs. In Los Angeles, activist Nancy Tootle Craig, who ran one of California's largest grocery store firms, distributed votes for women tea. Alright, so an example is given before and another example similar to that is given after the blank. This is basically like the previous question we solved. So A, it says for example, and no, again, we cannot use for example because there's a sequence of examples given. You cannot say for example over and over again. Choice B, to conclude. There is no conclusion and it's not concluding anything. It's just giving us another example similar to that in the previous one. Choice C, it says similarly. Yeah, this could make sense again. And D, it says in other words. In other words is basically the same as to conclude. It summarizes it. So choice C is the correct answer. In 2019, researcher Patricia Jurado Gonzalez and food historian Nawal Nasrallah prepared a stew from a 4,000-year-old recipe found on a Mesopotamian clay tablet. When they tasted the dish, known as pasratum, unwinding, they found that it had a mild taste and inspired a sense of calm. The researchers, knowing that dishes were sometimes named after their intended effects, theorized that the dish's name, unwinding, referred to its function, to help ancient diners relax. So they basically called it unwinding because they knew that some dishes were sometimes named after their intended effects. So let's look at the multiple choices. A says therefore. Therefore is used when there's a cause and effect transition. Cause and effect basically means as a result. So something happened and there was an effect because of that cause. So sometimes it's really hard to know if it's a cause and effect transition or if it's a continuation transition, or you basically don't know what to do. So in this case, when I'm unsure if it's a cause and effect transition, I use the cause and effect test. So basically, I flip the places of the line before and after the blank and put because in between them. So watch this. The researchers, knowing that dishes were sometimes named after their intended effects, theorized that the dish's name, unwinding, referred to its function, to help ancient diners relax. Because when they tasted the dish, known as pasratum, unwinding, they found that it had a mild taste and inspired a sense of calm. So did you see what I did there? I basically replaced the line after the blank with the line before the blank, and I put because in between them. And we can see that this made perfect sense. It was still like a normal sentence. And whenever this happens, that means you'll use a cause and effect transition. So therefore could be correct. Choice B. Alternately, it basically means or alternatively. And C, nevertheless. Nevertheless is used for contrasting, and there is no contrasting here. Lastly, likewise. Likewise is incorrect in this case because likewise is used for a similar but new idea. And there is no similar but new idea. There is just a cause and effect. So something happened before the blank, and because of that thing that happened, after the blank something else happened. So choice A is correct. Scientists long debated the origins of chondrules, tiny glass beads that form in meteors billions of years ago. For decades, different theories were proposed, from lightning strikes to powerful rock collisions, but none had sufficient evidentiary support. Scientists found strong evidence that chondrules were formed by shockwaves in nearby nebula. So just recently, after so long, scientists found evidence. And let's look at the multiple choices. A, it says, for example. There is no example given. This just says that after so long, some scientists found evidence. Choice B says, therefore. Therefore is used for cause and effect, and nothing has happened in previous sentence that led to a result after the blank. Choice C, similarly. There is no similar but new idea here, so this is also wrong. D, finally. Finally means at the end or after so long, and this does match our answer prediction. So D is correct. In the early 1970s, Albert Popa took up graffiti art, spraying his work onto what was at the time an unconventional surface, concrete. Albert's son David has chosen an unusual canvas for his new art project, Fractured. In this remarkable work, the artist draws charcoal faces onto fragmented ice floes in Finland, creating the visual effect of a face slowly fracturing. So, just like his father, he painted or sprayed his work on unconventional surfaces. Now let's check the multiple choices. A says, however. however, shows a contrast. But no, there is no contrast here. There's just a similarity between the father and the son. Choice B says indeed. Indeed means to strengthen the point mentioned before. So it basically means in fact. But there is no point that was stated in the previous sentence that was strengthened afterwards. It just says that like father, like son. Choice C, second. Second is used for time, like first I got out of bed, second I ate breakfast, and so on and so forth. So this is of course random and incorrect. Choice D says likewise. Likewise is used for something similar or basically similarly. So a new idea that is similar to each other. So choice D is correct. In 1933, the 20th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified. The amendment mandates that presidential inaugurations be held on January 20th, approximately 10 weeks after the November election. This amendment requires newly elected U.S. senators and representatives to be sworn into their respective offices on January 3rd. So for this one, it gives additional information. So let's look at the multiple choices. A says instead. Instead is used for contrasting, but in here we just have additional information. Choice B, for instance. When is for instance used? When there is an example given. And there is no example given here. C, specifically. Specifically is used for more specific details, when you go into more specific details, but this does not mention more specific details about what was previously stated. Choice D, in addition. In addition basically means to give additional information, so of course this is going to be correct. My interest in old public libraries has led me to seek them out whenever I visit a new part of the United States. I could visit every state in the US and still not find the oldest public library in the Western Hemisphere. That library, the Biblioteca Palafoxiana, is located in Puebla, Mexico. So even after trying to search in every state of the US, he could still not find the oldest public library. So you see there's a bit of contrast there. So the only contrasting word in here is nevertheless, so that's the correct one. The more diverse and wide-ranging an animal's behaviors, the larger and more energy-demanding the animal's brain tend to be. From an evolutionary perspective, animals that perform only basic actions should allocate fewer resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. The specialized subtypes of ants within colonies provide an opportunity to explore this hypothesis. So the more stuff an animal does, the more energy it uses. So if it does less stuff, then it uses less energy. So this is cause and effect. Something happened, and as a result of the thing that happened, something else happens. Or there's an effect. Alright, let's look at the multiple choices. A, subsequently. Subsequently means afterwards. So subsequently is not a cause and effect transition. It just means afterwards. It's used for time. Then we got choice B. Choice B says besides. Besides means apart from. So this is incorrect because it's not a cause and effect transition. We want a transition that says the more stuff an animal does, the more energy it uses. So as a direct cause or effect of that, if it does less stuff, then it uses less energy. So it's similar. So choice B is also wrong. C, nevertheless, it's contrasting. We already know this is wrong. D, thus. Thus is cause and effect. It means therefore, as a result. And yeah, it makes sense in this context. In his 1925 book, The Morphology of Landscape, US geographer Carl Sauer challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures. Sauer argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development by virtue of their interactions with the environment. So the line after the blank goes into more detail about what was previously stated, so obviously the answer is going to be specifically. Biographer Michael Gora notes that the novelist Henry James lived in a world of second thoughts, frequently tinkering with his novels and stories after their initial publication. However, the differences between the 1881 first edition and the 1908 edition of his novel A Portrait of a Lady are extreme, even by James standards. Some critics regard the two editions as two different novels altogether. So in here, it confirms, so the line after the blank confirms what was previously stated even more. When something gets confirmed even more, we use in fact. Establishing coordinated universal time (UTC) is no easy task. Each month, readings of a single second from atomic clocks around the world are taken and sent to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures (BIPM) in France. BIPM meteorologists perform the meticulous work of assembling these minutely disparate readings into a globally shared time standard. So at that place, they do some work over there. So we need a transition that shows the location. And then here we have the word there. I misspelled it. There it shows or indicates a location. So A is correct. Earth's auroras, colorful displays of light seen above the northern and southern poles, result broadly speaking from the sun's activity. The sun releases charged particles that are captured by Earth's magnetic field and channeled toward the poles. These particles then collide with atoms in the atmosphere, causing the atoms to emit auroral light. We can see that this gives more detail on what's previously mentioned. So of course it's going to be choice A specifically, because it goes into more specific detail. Observing that the fire in a closed container soon went out, leading 18th century scientists did not conclude that fresh air, specifically oxygen, is necessary for combustion. Instead, many theorized that the container's air had become saturated with a substance called phlogiston. When Joseph Priestley first isolated oxygen gas in 1774, he termed it dephlogisticated air. Alright, so this is a cause and effect question, and you can even make sure using the cause and effect test. So you could say, when Joseph Priestley first isolated oxygen gas in 1774, he termed it dephlogisticated air, because observing that a fire in a closed container soon went out, leading 18th century scientists did not conclude that fresh air, specifically oxygen, is necessary for combustion. Instead, many theorized that the container's air had become saturated with a substance called phlogiston. Yes, so this makes sense. So, in other words, it means to conclude. No, there is no conclusion here. For this reason, it is used to strengthen the point mentioned before. So it means in fact. This is a cause and effect transition. So this could be correct. Alternatively, it means instead or. So this is wrong. Nevertheless is contrasting, so this is wrong. So the only one that's correct here is B, for this reason. When in the 1800s, geologists first realized that much of Earth had once been covered by great sheets of ice, some theorized that the phenomenon was cyclical, occurring at regular intervals. Each ice age is so destructive, though, that it largely erases the geological evidence of its predecessor. Geologists were unable to confirm the theory of cyclical ice ages until the 1960s. Alright, so this is also a cause and effect. So because ice ages are so destructive, they remove all of the evidence. And as a result, geologists were unable to confirm the theory of cyclical ice ages until the 1960s. So we need something like as a result, and in here we have hence, which is a cause and effect transition. So this is correct. Moreover, it means additionally. So this is incorrect because there is no additional information. C, nevertheless, contrasting. This is wrong. Next is used for sequences. So this is also wrong. Originally coined by economist Juan Robinson to refer to markets with multiple sellers of a product but only one buyer, the term monopsony can also refer to markets where demand for labor is limited. In a product monopsony, the single buyer can force sellers to lower their prices. In a labor monopsony, employers can force workers to accept lower wages. Alright, let's look at the choices. Earlier. Earlier means beforehand or something that happened before, but no, nothing happened beforehand. B, instead. Instead can be used instead of alternatively or. So this is also wrong. C, similarly. Similarly means that there's a new but similar idea, which makes sense because it talks about monopsony. And in here it says in a product monopsony, the single buyer can force sellers to lower their prices. And in a labor monopsony, employers can force workers to accept lower wages. So basically, they're both examples about monopsony. And they both give an example about monopsony, so they have the same idea. Choice D In particular basically means specifically, or and we know specifically is used when something goes into more detail. So this is wrong. Last question, but before I solve it, you can join our June SAT English workshop where I'll host a webinar the day before the exam where I share my best strategies, do lots of practice, and you can DM me or ask the others in the community questions. And if you're not sure if this is the right purchase for you, book a call with us. If you have more than a month left till the SAT, you can apply to work with us in the form below to get a guaranteed 150 plus points boost in 30 days. Last question about transitions. According to Doverger's law, countries with the single ballot majoritarian elections for single member districts tend to polarize into two-party systems, wherein dueling political parties consistently dominate the political system. Countries with proportional representation electoral systems tend to support multipartyism, under which power gets distributed among many political parties. So this is the contrasting question. It says two opposite things. So in here, we have a word that says conversely. So conversely means on the other hand or in contrast. So this is correct. This is a contrasting transition. If you want to learn how to solve the grammar questions, watch this video.